Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta. Welcome. This is the first in our series entitled For Art's Sake. This is a very exciting night for us. We're taping on location in the new lobby of Playhouse 22. In less than 2 hours, this lobby will be filled with honored guests who are here to celebrate the rededication of Playhouse 22. Our lobby isn't quite finished yet, but behind me is a beautiful exhibition of oil paintings done by Mill Hand, who is an artist, but he's also a member of the Players. In fact, he's on my executive board. But before we go any further, and later on, by the way, I do want you to meet 4 special people to the Playhouse. We'll be going on into the theater and we'll be doing a little reminiscing. But first, I'd like you to meet a special friend of the arts, a man who, in the words of show business, needs absolutely no introduction at all, John Runyon, Township Administrator. John, I'm so glad you can make it tonight. I know that you just flew in from Washington, and I have to ask you this. Are your arms tired?
Yeah, very tired. It's a strenuous flight. Strenuous flight.
John, although most of the town, we hope, does know that you are administrator, very few of them do know that you are also president of the Museum Corporation, and probably non-existent people know that you are a business advisor to Playhouse 22. Mm-hmm. Tell me something. I have a double-barreled question for you, and I've been meaning to ask you this for a long time anyway. How and when did the Township Administration actually decide to support the arts and get very involved with the arts programming?
Well, I think it goes back over 10 years. There was a little bit of it over the years in various administrations, but the real commitment and support began with the election of Jean Walling as mayor in 1972. And one of the first things that happened in her administration was the creation and appointment of the East Brunswick Arts Council, which is now the East Brunswick Arts Commission, as you well know. And that group began to foster the arts in our community. They had a lot to work with because they did have the community of Players around for 15 years.
25.
Well, 25 now, 15 then. And other groups such as that. But it was really 1972, 73. And with the passing of Jean Walling, I think that the community in the election of Bill Fox as mayor received the benefit in the arts, in any case, of a man who was as committed, if not more committed, than Jean was to the arts. And so it has grown over the years. And it hasn't just been the mayor. The council has been tremendously supportive. Without appropriations, you can't support anything. And the council passes the budgets and provides the resources to do these kinds of things. So it's been the support of the mayor-council since really 72. And I think it is really reflective of the growth of the support of the community generally in the arts in East Brunswick. Which has brought about the museum, which has brought about really the library and the kind of cultural and art resources that are there, has brought about Playhouse 22, has continued the outstanding work of the East Brunswick Arts Council, now Arts Commission, and the cooperative efforts through the school system, the video program that we're on, I think is a tremendous contribution to the cultural life of our community. So it has grown in increments over the last 10 years. There was no one point in time. I think it took a catalyst. I think that original catalyst was Jean Walling, as she was a catalyst for many, many things.
Oh, she certainly was, and she was a very dear friend of the Players.
She was. I remember a number of you participated in a fundraiser for her called the Walling Follies.
Oh, I will never forget it.
Her husband appeared as little Lord Fauntleroy, and I think he weighs about 300 pounds, and it was absolutely amazing, and it was a fun night. It was more, I remember that fundraiser because it was more a kind of celebration of a good time, of good feelings, of warmth, of caring in the community, and I think that's what East Brunswick is all about. I think that's what began back then, and it's continued now here in Playhouse 22. There's a real warmth and a concern for being a part of this community, which is a very exciting place to be, East Brunswick.
Yes, well, we all think so anyway, and I think that our arts program has really been progressing tremendously and will continue to go throughout the years. And
I think it will. I think the commitment now, and the last few years especially, has been to provide the facilities so that the folks in the arts within East Brunswick can have a really decent place to do their thing. The community players, the township, not we, the township loaned some money to make this happen. the township, we're using federal monies, made the museum physically happen. But that's where the commitment ends in terms of public funds. Now it's the community coming together to make exciting things happen in these institutions, which the town has helped foster.
Well, I think this is only the beginning of a dream, too. Playhouse 22 tonight. I think in time all of us would like to see this entire area here become an art complex and bring in artists in residence and potters and people who work in ceramics and maybe a little gift shop even.
I agree. I hope that happens. A dream that was written about back in '72 was that kind of a thing, perhaps on a grander scale when it was written about by some folks back then who were talking about it. But I think that's a real possibility. The cultural life of this community has only in one way begun to grow. It is a beginning. There's a lot of exciting and marvelous things that can happen in the future, and you've just mentioned a few of them, and I hope that it will happen here. I hope this Playhouse will be the center for more growth and expansion and opportunity in the arts in East Brunswick. It's very exciting. I'm pleased to be here. I'm glad I could get back from the soccer tournament that my daughter is in to be a part of Playhouse 22 and the Community Players 25th anniversary. Thanks for having me.
John, thank you for being my very first guest and helping me get over stage fright.
You're doing fine. Love you.
Well, I promised you that I would take you on into the theater, and here we are. We're sitting on the stage in front of Patsy Krieger's lovely drop that she has done for the show tonight. I have a question that I want to ask these four friends of mine, and I really wanted to tell you something about them. All four of them have been the bulwark, and certainly sometimes they have been bullish, of the directorial staff of the Players. And I thought it might be fun for all of us to take a stroll down memory lane tonight. It hasn't all been peaches and cream. In fact, show business isn't really as glamorous as most people think it is. But first, I'd like to introduce the gentlemen that are seated around me. I use the word gentleman loosely. Here on my, here on my left is Elliot Taubenslag, who is a familiar figure to you all, but he was also founder of the East Brunswick Community Players 25 years ago. And on my right over here is Tex Vasta, otherwise known as my husband. To his right is Ron Leiberman. And over on Elliot's left is Chick Moskowitz. But I think I'm going to start off with Elliot tonight. Elliot, you know, seeing that you're the oldest one of us.
That's right.
That's right. What can you remember, or what is the most memorable thing that you can think of during the last 25 years that we have all been together?
Well, there have been so many things that have occurred, but I just wanted to say I'm really glad you introduced Joe as your husband, because over the last 25 years, Dolly, you and I have worked so close together. Most people have thought that we were husband and wife, and right now I am not her husband, I'm only her step-husband.
Very good, Elliot.
Right. But all kidding aside, I think one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever had, and probably Dolly and Joe will remember too, one of the shows we did very early in our beginning of the Community Players was a show called Happy Doomsday that I had written the book for, and I had written the lyrics for. The music was written by a fellow by the name of Jim Delahanty. And Jim had worked with me, and we had done some preparation and some rehearsing over the summer on this, but the show was to open in October. In September, Jim left for California, where he was going to start his new job. We had a young lady who was going to be playing the score for us on the piano, and I guess around September 20th, she informed us that she had taken the score with her to work, and it was the only copy of the music,
That's right,
remember?
that's right.
And had lost the entire thing. After they picked me off the floor, I said, do you remember anything? And she wept. She said, I don't remember anything. I don't know anything. I can't play anything. And we only had, maybe a week or two to go before we opened. Well, the only thing we could do, we scrounged up some money, because we were, at that time, working with no money at all. Whatever
Hasn't changed.
No. Whatever money we had came from our pockets, and we hoped to have been reimbursed, and I know we would have been. We were. But we scrounged together, and we got Jim a ticket from California, because it was only for one weekend, and we got him a ticket back too.
That's right.
And so he came in from California about a day or two before we opened, played the show, and flew back again. And I think he's still there.
We had to feed him too.
We had to feed him
We
too,
had to feed
right?
him. You know, I can remember that you had an interim rehearsal pianist, and you had the single line, the top line, I believe it's called, on a musical score, and she could just pick out each one of the notes, and it was wonderful going into dress rehearsal with her going, we were all a nervous wreck.
Yes.
But that was a wild time. You know, I had almost forgotten about that. That was a long
I
time
didn't
ago.
forget it. The other incident that occurred with that particular show was we were doing our rehearsals in my home, in my living room, and my wife was not in the show, and at that time she probably was a little more active than she is now. She since has learned better. And she used to make coffee every day. That was her job. She'd make coffee and bring it out, and everybody would guzzle it away, etc. And then finally, somebody was very, very nice, and they decided to give me a gift because I'd written the show, I had directed the show, and they said, wow, let's do something. And sure enough, they gave us a coffee maker, and we still use it.
That's right.
Right.
We borrow it here often.
Right, so that was really a wonderful thing for us. But it was a good experience.
It certainly was. Listen, Tex, you know, as I said to everyone, you were my husband, or you still are my husband.
At night only.
At night only. During the day, he works, and he's house manager here. And there haven't been too terribly many kind words that we've been saying to one another for the last 3 weeks while we've been trying to finish up here. Our supper hours have been kind of a battle zone.
Oh, I called you on the phone the other day.
That's true. But listen, when I told you I wanted to do this, I hope you thought of some of the things over the years. What have you decided to come up with to share with our viewers tonight?
Well, there was a couple of things that I thought of. And Chick can remember this too, because he was involved in one of them. When we did Fiddler on the Roof, we cast a little fella in the part of Tevye, and we gave the cart to be made to others. Let's put others, I don't want to mention names. But when we received the cart, I didn't see it till the entrance was made on stage with Tevye. Well, Tevye couldn't reach the handles of the cart, but he tried pulling it in. Well, he was really a wonderful guy to work with, no matter, I guess if they'd have gave him an elephant to carry, he would have come out.
He certainly would have.
Well, and another time was when we did burlesque. And I think that burlesque was my first endeavor with the community players. And we had one song in the show. And we had put Patacito, I think his name was, into the part because he was the only one that could play the piano at that time. So came night of the show, my set was completely changed from what it was designed. And by the way, this was designed by Ernie Olbrich. And it was completely different. Well, the lead, who happened to be Mel Boyd, a very good friend of mine, got so shook up that night because he had so many costume changes to make that after we finished the show, I said to him, Mel, I wish you put this song back in the show because you forgot it. He says, I thought I did it. But it reminded me of the time when we were playing the parks in Roosevelt Park, and it was the very first show that was ever done there, and called Bel Ferdinando, by the way. Elliot was Zito. I was, the way the director called me, Geppetto. I was supposed to be Giuseppe, but he called me Geppetto. And came the time when we were crying over the jackasses that were killed by the soldiers, and the turntable was supposed to turn, and I think Elliot and I cried for a half hour because the turntable never did turn. But that was another one, but that wasn't here. But this has been one big dream for my wife and I. By the way, she is the backbone of me. Even though she says she don't see me, she pushes me here to get it done. So, blame her for it.
Oh, Joe, thank you so much. That was very sweet of you. Moving right along, as they say, Our next guest is Chick Moskowitz. And Chick, I want to ask you the same question. Of all the things that you have done for us, what stands out in your mind as some of the most memorable?
What stands out the most memorable? All of it is indelible. All of it is memorable. I think, the one I think, before we got to the theater, same crew always working together one way or the other. Joe Vasta doing scenery, props. He was my stage manager that particular time. And we did a show in a church. That was our place where we could go for that particular stand. We'd bring in our scenery, we'd do our rehearsals in there and all that, and take everything away. And that was a McNally show called Next. And we opened up on a Thursday. It was a Thursday, a Friday, and a Saturday. Thursday, the moon shone at night. I'll tell you what happened Friday. And Saturday, there was a blizzard. Well, the Thursday night performance was fantastic. I mean, it was really high. We had a double bill. It was really great. And I went home pleased. I didn't have to do any more. Just the actors did. I could rest. I could stay off. And Joe had all the rest of the work to do, because he's a stage manager. He does everything after the show is directed. I got a telephone call on Friday evening. I figured I'd come in as a guest. Dolly says, "Are you standing up?" I said, "No." She said, "Sit down." I said, "Why? I just came back from, my 9 to 5 job. What do you want me to do?" She said, "Sit down." And I did. And she said, "X, I'm not going to tell you the name, cut his finger off in a shop today, so we don't have the lead." Oh. I'll be down in the theater in a half an hour. Got down to the theater about 7. That's about an hour and a half before the curtain. And we said, what shall we do? We couldn't get to the radio to tell everybody not to come to the show. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do. Well, Dolly went off to get to the WTTC to tell everybody who could hear us not to come down. We said, well, the only thing we could offer people who made the trip, at least they can see what happens in an emergency yes. and how you redirect the show. Well, we needed a lead. No problem. We took the stage manager, Joe Vasta, and we said, Dolly, bring us coffee, and we're not going home. And we did 36 hours straight, learned the role, reblocked, and we performed that night. The other little teeny memorable thing is, and one of the blocking, this sort of needed a medical detail, where the nurse taps the guy's knee when he has a crossed knee. I didn't know till that performance that Joe can't cross his knees. So we blocked that. That was sort of special. The other time, I think it all relates to Joe, however. I don't know why.
You're really in trouble tonight.
We seem to be working a lot together. In this theater, not this building, but this theater in this location was the first show. And we didn't know whether the stage was going to be on that end or this end when my show was going to go on. But I could work, we worked on the floor as a studio way, and we worked in the barn we call the next door. And the only thing I really needed to have was, please tell me, Joe, when will I get the stage to put the actors on? He promised. Give me 2 doors. He got me 2 doors. No stage yet. We mounted the show in 9 days, and it was good, thanks to Joe. The actors, however, had a lot of difficulty because they had to tolerate all the sawing, skilled sawing and hammering and nailing in the shop in which we were working. I couldn't hear them, but they could hear each other. They couldn't hear the cues. But that was a pretty good event.
I remember how hairy you used to look when you walked out of those rehearsals. You'd mumble things to yourself like, I can't deal with this much longer. I can't deal with this much longer.
Well, what we do.
That's right.
I think those days have passed.
Yes. Well, not really. Yes, not really. Ron, the last of the Mohegans. Actually, Ron's the newest of the directors, even though Ron's been with us for about 15 years now.
That's right.
That's right.
Doesn't seem that long.
Sometimes longer, Ron.
I think one of my most memorable moments had to be my introduction to the theater group. I was attending graduate school at Rutgers at the time, and you were beginning a production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Your musical director had taken ill, and you needed a replacement. One of the students that I was working with in Highland Park happened to be in Elliot's English class and had volunteered my name to you. You called me and asked me if I'd be willing to help with the show. At that point, I was up to my neck in research at Rutgers and said I wasn't available. And I really didn't do this kind of work on a regular basis. You called me every day for a week until it reached the point where I was ready to tear the phone out of the wall. At that point, I began to refer to you as the East Brunswick Chinese water torture. I finally came to the first rehearsal, sat down at the piano, began working with the chorus, played a few notes, and the unmatchable Naomi Sunshine turned to me. She was sitting in the first row and said, "That was very good for playing with your elbows. Would you like to try your fingers next?"
Well, we're glad you joined us, Ron, even though we've had a lot of thick and thin years.
Absolutely. I think of a show that we were all in together when we were doing Sweet Bird of Youth.
Oh, God.
And we couldn't find a rehearsal space.
That's right.
At that point, we used an abandoned factory.
Yes, I remember.
Without
that had
electricity.
no electricity, no floors, just dirt.
No bathrooms.
No bathrooms. We had to rent an electric generator so that we could have any kind of light, so that we could use the power tools. And of course, if anyone had to take care of any personal needs, they had to improvise and use a little theatrical imagination. Fortunately, it was a very large factory, and there were many dark corners that people could walk towards. We built the set there, and remember, they had very wide loading doors. And finally, when we attempted to bring the set over to the high school, they had forgotten one little thing. They didn't measure the size of the doors leading into the high school, so all the platforms had to be taken apart, brought in piece by piece, and then reassembled on the stage.
Well, you know something, Ron, what makes you so memorable to me is every time I have been in one of your shows, knowing my fear of height, Ronnie somehow manages to get me on top of a 15-foot platform, a 20-foot platform, and I stand there getting very green.
Yeah, I love the use of platforms, and we've had our humorous incidents regarding those. I remember the production of Follies, in which the top platform was 18 feet off the stage.
That's the one I'm talking about.
And we finally got the set constructed on the East Brunswick stage, and I remember the ladies climbing up to the top platform for the first time, some of them absolutely in tears. I believe Joe led you up by the hand.
That's right. That's right.
When we did Company, and that's another infamous platform, we had a jungle gym set of 5 apartments located at various levels on this large set of platforms. And I always am a firm believer that before I let the cast work the platforms, I'll walk across them first to make sure they're safe.
Of course, you're heavier than all of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I started climbing up the Company set of platforms, and unknown to me, one of the support beams had not been put into place. The person building the set turned around and noticed me just about to set foot on that platform, started to warn me, but didn't shout quickly enough. As soon as I landed on the platform, I went straight through, fell 5 feet to the stage floor, and then had to turn around and tell the cast that the platforms were perfectly safe and there was nothing to worry about.
Well, listen, the guys over there are telling me, wrap it up, we're running out of time. So I want to thank all of you, and I hope that the 4 of us, or the 5 of us, will be together for a long, long time in our new home. Here's to it.
Amen.
Let's do it. All right, thank you.
I decided to take all of you backstage and into one of the dressing rooms to wrap up the program tonight. It's almost time for the reception to start, and we're really looking forward to seeing the opening production of Mikado. I hope all of you have had a good time tonight watching the show, and you'll be back with us in November to our program For Art's Sake. Take care.